big crochet projects take a huge amount of time. I'm going to run through the speediest to the slowest crochet projects that I've worked on over the last decade. And you might be surprised by the ones that were super short and the ones that took me literally months to complete. And in some cases they're still not there. For most of us, there is no actual full project that we can do in 5 minutes. This is what I made as an example of what I can put together in 5 minutes. And it's not all the little squares that I'm showing you, it's just each one of them. And unless your crochet project that you're putting together at the moment is just a nice comfy blanket for a fancy Sylvanian, then 5 minutes isn't going to be enough to achieve anything of note, although it is a great amount of time to make a start on something that's going to be spectacular in the long run. So if in 5 minutes I can make the equivalent of this tiny granny square, then logically you'd say, okay, give me half an hour, I could make 6 of those, and maybe, if I'm on a particular roll, even crochet them together. That's practically a washcloth. But what's really interesting about crochet is sometimes the bigger the project gets, the more it seems to slow and stall. This, with a few minor distractions, but nothing out of the ordinary, is what I can make in terms of granny square if you give me an hour. After the first half an hour, I'd got to the edge of the blue section, and then the next section, of course, in another half an hour, was these pinks here. Now, I'm a human with at least half a brain, and you would think logically that it would be obvious to me that I can't do the same number of rounds as the blanket expands, because each round grows and gets bigger and requires more stitches. And yet I was still quite surprised it didn't expand any more than those 2 rounds in the next half an hour, and I don't think I'd slowed my pace at all. It is also possible, when you just have an hour, to make a stuffed animal if you really want to. Just to make sure that I wasn't talking nonsense, this morning I quickly put together a little crochet pig based on my crochet pig keychain pattern, and it took me just over half an hour to do. Another example of one that's just like that I think also could be done in half an hour is my little keychain kitty cat. It is very slightly more complicated in that you have to stick the yarn through with a needle to make your whiskers, and it's got a little bit of a longer tail, but all in all, not an unreasonable expectation of yourself for just over half an hour. That's when things really start to change. So we've just seen that that is the size of granny square that I can make personally in an hour. You'll be different, we all work at different paces, you might be a bit quicker or a bit slower, and that's all fine. You can have a project that is exactly the same size as the half-hour project, and it can take another half an hour on top of it to complete it. And here's a nice little example of this. So it's the same size, it's a keychain from a little keychain range. The free patterns for these are on my website, I'll link them below, but it takes twice as long because of the mane and the tail. Now they're just chains, that's all they are, little chains that are then either hooked or sewn back around the edge of the head. But the action of having to make this whole separate part means that it's understandably going to make a little bit longer of a project. The same is true when you have something that adds detail in a different way. So for example, in this little seal, you can see that its little nose, muzzle and little cheek pieces are all separately crocheted and then hand sewn on. So these take me about an hour to make in comparison to that little pig that was just half an hour. And after this is where the hours really start to stack up, particularly when it comes to stuffed animals. These toys all take, I would say, between 2 and 5 hours to make. I appreciate that's quite a range, and the reason that I've put this into one category is it's basically things you can make in a day. The reasonable part of the day when you're on a crocheting high and you're gonna make a thing today. So one of the quickest of these category is the little guinea pig, and it's fast because it is only a few different shapes. There's no colour changes involved in this at all. You're gonna have to restart to make the ears and the feet, but other than that, it's nice, basic, straightforward, and you're not having to do anything complicated, and there's just a little bit of hand sewing at the end. Then we've got my manatee, and the manatee is a little bit slower, predominantly because the fins are a tiny bit fiddlier to put together, but also we've got this lip section that involves some back loop and front loop to get that nice classic manatee lip. The capybara is again a little bit slower to make. The main difference here is in order to get that neck position that's very classic of a capybara, I have done a slightly unusual shape here around the neck, which involves some partial rounds going backwards and forwards, and then some very slightly more complicated positioning for the sewing. Rather than this being one continuous thing, it's slightly different and sloped and affixed in a slightly different way. The whale is another great example for this section. It is predominantly made in just a few different pieces, but it has this whole separate section which looks like it wouldn't be that time consuming to make, but it is the same as making another body again essentially. It's just because it's unstuffed it looks smaller, but to give it that sort of thick and bulky shape I did make it in the same spiraling pattern that you would make a body part that you stuffed, but unstuffed. Realistically, if you are a competent and confident crocheter, you can make this guy in a day, but we are starting to lapse into the next section now, which is 5 days. So when I say that a crochet project will take you 5 days, what I mean is that in your normal sort of working week period, that you're a person who crochets for a few hours each evening. This is not assuming that you're going to sit and crochet continuously for 5 days with no sleep, because that would be crazy and hurt your wrists. It's just assuming that if you work on this project and you've got the pattern there and you're ready to go and all your stuff's ready, within the week you could achieve these toys. The squid got some fine details that slow it down a bit. Particularly this crest at the end here involves some shaping and then surface crocheting to form the shape. There's some back and front loop crochet to get his little head here. There's some tiny bits of sewing around the eyes. And then, as we all know, something that takes quite a long time to do is just make a lot of chains and then sew back into them. And that's how we're getting these central tentacles here besides all the arms. This alpaca might look like a small project, but this one is a 5-dayer because if you look carefully, there's the wool. And this is made in long chains that you then single crochet back into and then are hand sewn to be placed in specific positions on the head and body. And then we've got toys that are just by their very nature more complicated. This zebra is probably the toy that took me the physically longest to put together. I sewed chains in the black yarn and then hand sewed them on in the positions that I wanted to onto the zebra. So the unicorn has lots of lovely curly hair and a nice curly tail as well. As you can see, there are a few colour changes, nothing overly complicated with this one. There's a little tummy patch and I added a bit of surface crochet to detail around the ears as well. But all these things do add up time-wise, so it will take you a few sessions in order to put a toy like this together, and probably approximately a week. Little details like the spots on my giraffe as well can really add to the time to make something. These little splodges, they're all crocheted individually in a variety of different shapes with a few repeats and then hand sewn. And even things like deciding where you want the patches takes a little bit of extra time too. Now if you give me 5 days, I can also make you a relatively large granny square blanket. Personally, I find this traditional granny square, you just build out and out and out in rows, that is the quickest one to make. If you're going to start putting them together in a different way, it's going to take more time. A blanket that's going to take a month or 5 weeks to make is probably going to be one that's more like a corner to corner style blanket. I have a corner to corner style blanket that I'm making, but I keep picking it up and putting it down because the progress feels so much slower than when I'm making granny squares. Now, I don't know if it's because I'm less familiar with corner to corner, I don't do it as much, but I think it's the density of the stitches means that these really do drag a bit. And I have a couple of projects that have taken me on balance about 5 months to complete. Now, this is at least a few evenings a week and some time on some weekend days working on the projects. I love this blanket. It is made with one of my very favourite yarns. It's the Happy Place yarn. It's a DK weight yarn that I chose to use, which is part of what made it so time consuming because it's small stitches. It is also, as you can see, a variety of different granny square styles within it. So it's a mix of a more traditional style of granny square with a solid granny square. So I had bigger gaps for some parts of it, and each square is slightly different to the last. It took me about 5 months to finish. finish, and a lot of that time was simply deciding how to lay out all the different squares to get the best look at the end, and crocheting them all together and making a border. And the difference between this original tiny starting square that took 5 minutes and then a massive finished item in a much smaller yarn weight is massive. And finally, I want to show you the thing that took me the longest. It was probably in reality about 5 months again, but there were some reasons that this took me a lot longer than anything else. I'm gonna put it on for you. It's a jumper. I didn't want to follow a clothing pattern. I just didn't. I've never followed someone else's pattern to make clothes, and I was overconfident. I was like, I can freehand this. It's logical. And I could. But I've got to say, it is not the best fitted, and it took me so long to finish. Compiling all the individual pieces, repeatedly trying them on various stages of the process. It was a marathon and definitely not a sprint. I would be fascinated to know, you very sensible people who followed other people's patterns to make your crochet sweaters, how long they took. But this one was literally months in the making. But what about you? Do you agree with the timescales that I've shown for the different things here? What do you think? I'd love to hear. Chat to me in the comments section below. And if you like any of the things that you've seen in this video, most of them have patterns and most of them are free on the Lucy Kate Crochet website. So I'll put links in the description down below so you can find them there. And if you have any questions for me, obviously, just ask those in the comments section as well. Happy crocheting.